Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the tunes. It took me somewhere warmer, cheered me up a bit. A very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for hanging out there and waiting for us to start. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the November Meetup for the Architecture Fringe 2021. My name is Andy Summers. I'm a co-founder and co-director of the Architecture Fringe. And along with my colleagues, Raina Armstrong, Shona Common, Liana Bauer, Matt Limpiotos, and Neil Maguire, welcome to the online space here. If you are a new person to the Architecture Fringe, a very warm welcome to you. Thanks for joining us. If you've joined us before, welcome back. We are obviously replicating the open monthly meetups that we normally have in the run up to the Architecture Fringe Festival. We're online this time on a Thursday evening because we want to try and remember the daylight on Saturday mornings. So welcome to you and thanks for hanging out with us. So we also have a special guest with us this evening, Finn Harper. Hello, Finn. Thanks for joining us. Finn's going to respond to our unlearning provocation. How are you doing, Finn? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. So if you have been with us before, I'll just give you a very quick rundown of what the structure is for this evening. We will have a little meet and greet people in just a second, just to warm us all up. And then Neil will take us through an introduction to Finn. Finn will give us a presentation in response to the unlearning theme. And then after that, we'll be breaking out into spaces, which is the main essence of the open meetups, is to try and obviously help each other for potential open program projects that might be brewing. We are here to help, and also it's for everyone to meet other people. Obviously, when we're online, it's not necessarily the easiest way, rather than in situ space. So feel free to post anything in the chat, any questions as we go, we will answer them. We can also do that in the breakout spaces. If you want to meet someone, the Architecture Fringe is the best excuse ever to talk to anybody. So either chat to them here or contact them online afterwards. Just a very quick time to say hello to some people. Raina's going to distribute us into some little random spaces for a few minutes, for 3 minutes, just to meet and greet. So off we go. I think everyone's back. Welcome back. I hope you met someone new. I did. It was very nice. And if you maybe knew someone else in the chat, it was nice to say hello to them. Just very briefly, I will just share my screen if I can, for us to. Oh, I can't do that apparently. Let's see. Oh, weirdly, I can't share my screen. Okay, but we have set up some online spaces basically because since we started in 2015, we've always tried to understand or see how we can create an online space where people can kind of self-organize without waiting for us. We had a sort of back of house Facebook group at the start, and we've created some Padlet pages, which I'll post in the chat because I can't share my screen. But basically, we are setting up these pages just to see if they'll work. And they're a place for everybody to perhaps post if you're needing some help, if you're looking for a collaborator. We have a specific page on venues across Scotland, which we're infilling. If you're looking for a venue, there's a lovely map which will take you through and show you some venues you might not have heard of. There is also, yes, a whole page for the open program, which you can begin to, has Raina done it? Yes, she has, thank you. The open program here, as you can see on this lovely page that Raina set up. So essentially on the left-hand side, there is some chat. So if you're needing any help or looking for anything, you can post in there and other people can reply and help your collaborators. And then across the page there's sort of columns which we set up for people to begin to maybe classify their event. If you're looking for anything to do with that, just feel free to build a post within there and other people can come and help. And then on venues one, this wonderful map, which is planet Earth. We have begun to tag some venues across Scotland that we know of. We're building that. But again, anyone can access this, and anyone can put a listing in for a venue. Next year we might be outdoors, we might be indoors, it's hard to tell, but as we navigate and try and future-proof our work, if you are looking for somewhere physical across Scotland, that map is a resource for you. So we'll be sharing all those links through our social media and MailChimp, so you don't have to necessarily remember them, but we'll put them into the chat, but they're there for you to use. Thank you, Raina, so much. Right, it's over to Mr. Neil Maguire now.
Thanks, Andy. So as you know, sort of with these open meetings, what we've decided to do, because they're happening online, is to invite a guest along every time we convene one of these meetings. And we're basically inviting those people to come and offer up a kind of a talk, a provocation at the start of the meeting as a way of kind of generating some ideas and thoughts around the kind of topic that we're looking at this year or this coming year for Architecture Fringe. So the theme for Architecture Fringe 2021 is unlearning. And as we're all abundantly aware at the moment, things that once seemed solid are changing and fluid. And in order to make that change positive and transformative, we need to engage in a process of unlearning and learning anew. So the theme for 2021 is unlearning. And we invite you to sort of join with us in that theme through your own events that you maybe want to program for Architecture Fringe, to kind of explore, interrogate, and expand on that theme. So as I say, we've invited Finn Harper to give a brief talk at the start tonight. We'll take questions in the chat function. So the chat function you can find at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions that crop up during Finn's talk, then please feel free to post them there, and we'll gather them up at the end. First of all, I just want to thank Finn for talking tonight. It's very kind of him to give up his Thursday evening to speak to us. And by way of a very, very brief introduction, Finn is a critic and curator exploring the intersection of architecture and politics. He's currently director of Open City, a charity that works with architecture and urban design to make our built environment more accessible and inclusive. And that is also part of the Open House Global Network. Prior to this, Finn worked as a deputy director at the Architecture Foundation and was a co-curator with Maria Smith, Matthew Diel, and Cecily Sachs-Olsen of the 2019 Oslo Architecture Triennale, with a program that was titled Enough, the Architecture of Degrowth. So taking over the helm of Open City as we entered the global pandemic has no doubt been challenging on a number of fronts, but one of the brilliant projects to come out of that was a new Open City publication, an alternative guide to the London boroughs. This was convened by Finn and edited by Owen Hatherley. The book feels like a real exploration in the best sense of the word, a wander through the less well-documented parts of the city in book form. It's testimony to how powerful architecture, place and space can be when evocatively and critically explored through language, good writing, and great insights from the broad range of contributors the book contains. Anyway, I would urge you all strongly to get a copy. I'm not on a retainer or anything yet. But anyway, tonight, Finn is going to talk to us about maintenance, care, and the desire to neglect. And he would be sort of expanding on how this possibly intersects with the theme that we've been talking about for Architecture 2021. So as I say, it's a 15-minute talk with a chance for questions at the end. And without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Finn.
Thanks very much. I'm going to immediately share my screen because I guess we're slightly behind schedule. I'm going to try and catch up. Can someone say something if they can see blue text on a black background? Yeah, good. Okay, let's kick off then. Thanks for having me. Good theme. So rare to see an architecture festival with an actually good theme. I think this is a typical of the Architecture Fringe to like kind of cut to the heart of the matter. I approve thoroughly. So my talk is called Uncareful, and it's about care and it's about neglect. What do the communist revolutionary leader Mao Zedong, the kind of explorer and possible lover of Queen Elizabeth I, Walter Raleigh, and the German lawyer from the 19th century, Wilhelm Wundt, have in common? Any guesses? No? Well, okay, the answer is Earth architecture. In December 1893, Mao was born in an earth house that was built by his father, the childhood home of Walter Raleigh. Ease Barton, made of cob, which is a mix of earth and straw. And in 1825, Wumpf, who was a lawyer, ditched the legal profession and built one of the tallest earth buildings in Europe, where it still stands 200 years later in Viborg. And in fact, of all the UNESCO World Heritage Sites in the world, more than 160 of them were built either wholly or partially from earth. So for 10,000 years, earth has been one of the most widely used construction materials on the planet. And there's, a couple of sort of very famous examples. Shibam in Yemen, a kind of ancient high-rise earth city. Of course, the Hakka, which are these vast earth and wood roundhouses in China. I'm sure you can think of many other kind of epic examples of earth architecture from the past. But what's weird is that despite its vanishingly small carbon footprint, earth is almost absent from contemporary architecture. Young architects today are rarely being tutored in how to design with adobe or cob or rammed earth. Indeed, they barely are even taught the terms. Instead, we are generally trained to use a narrow catalogue of highly processed, high carbon materials, steel, cement, standalone, of course, accounting for about 7% of the global carbon dioxide emissions on its own. So to address the climate emergency, few industries must transform as deeply and as fast as construction and architecture. And yet, earth, one of the lowest impact materials on the market and our kind of key ally in this fight, is barely used. Why? Well, a popular criticism of earth construction is that it requires regular maintenance, which is a feature widely considered a weakness in architecture. The materials that define our built landscape have often been not for their ecological value at all, but simply to do one thing, to reduce the burden of periodic maintenance. Thatched roofs, for example, have been tiled over, green spaces get paved over, tarmac gets poured over cobbles, such as this picture here. All of this trying to do the same thing, which is to reduce the maintenance requirements of this physical fabric. In construction, there is just this giant consensus among developers, among local authorities, among architects, among the general public, that repairing things as little as possible is an important goal. In fact, there's a certain amount of moralizing that goes with this. When a material weathers badly, we're very quick to chastise the architect for not having had the foresight to anticipate this deterioration and specify a more hard-wearing material instead. And here, for example, is Peter Barber's Donnybrook Quarter in East London, which has been sometimes criticised as Pete, when he designed it, painted it all bright white, which, in a damp UK climate goes a bit moldy, as you can kind of see under the window there, and the paint has also kind of peeled off the balcony. So we claim that a careful architect is one who anticipates maintenance requirements, designs in order to avoid them. But I think this is the exact opposite of careful. I think to be full of care should mean to be very willing to check in with whatever we are caring for and to demonstrate our care through many small acts of restoring and cultivation, rather than seeking from the outset to reduce our caring obligations entirely. That's not careful at all. That is careless. That is uncare. And so I want to argue that it is this desire to not repair, to not maintain, and to not care for the fabric of buildings once they are built that is ecologically and socially toxic and is something we must unlearn. It is fundamentally at odds with our deepest human instincts. It's hard to think of many examples where this desire to demonstrate love not through showing acts of care is positive, but it's easy to think of the opposite. Think, for example, of a young parent continuously checking on their newborn child, alert to any deterioration of health, mood, or happiness, ready to step in with feeding or nappy changing or cuddles of other acts of care at a moment's notice. Think of love-smitten teenagers who text and call each other hourly, sometimes more, constantly checking in, fueling the fire of their romance with small pings of affection and interest. Think of the pious disciple who prays frequently to their gods, famously among Muslims 5 times a day, even in the middle of the night, constantly topping up a relationship with the divine. Think of the gardener who must periodically and patiently prune, pick, water and weed their flower beds, slowly cultivating. A garden cannot be rushed, nor can it be left unattended for very long. A nutritionist who knows that a balanced diet of regular meals is far healthier than occasional gluttonous binge eating, or a personal trainer who recommends daily exercise of 20 minutes rather than an annual marathon followed by 12 months on the sofa. I could go on. But metaphors aside, there's a pretty strong ecological case to turn our backs on hard-wearing materials and instead embrace an architecture of care and maintenance. I'm going to just quickly talk through that ecological argument. So this is the Darwin Center. It's in the Natural History Museum. It was designed by C.F. Muller, who are Danish architects. And I saw them present it when I was a student. And they made a big show about telling me that this giant concrete egg, 60 meters long, 300 millimeter thick concrete sort of laboratories and exhibition spaces, was a very sustainable building. And I asked, what makes you think this is a sustainable building? It doesn't seem very sustainable. And the architect from C.F. Muller who was presenting it said, well, the thing is, it's sustainable because it will last for a long time. It will last for 200 years, he said. And so even though it emits a lot of carbon in day one, that's fine because, over 200 years, that's actually quite a low amount of carbon. Which seems sort of sensible, but actually it isn't. We know now that he was dead wrong because we don't have 200 years. This is the whole point of these tipping points that were kind of in the news recently about how fast the problem of climate change accelerates if we don't do something about it quickly. We don't have 200 years to kind of parcel out the carbon impact of a 200-year building. We have to reduce carbon emissions now, full stop. And the implications of this for architecture are totally profound because it means that it is no good making tough buildings that will last a long time at the expense of emitting a lot of carbon in their construction. That's no longer a viable model. So longevity, hard-wearingness, solidity, the very seductive values that we've invoked with material strategies over the years might have to be rethought or abandoned entirely. And maybe the architectural alternative to this is an architecture of care, an architecture which is not tough at all, that in fact requires constant maintenance as a design feature, but that doesn't come with that front-loaded blast of a high carbon emissions in construction. So what would that kind of architecture be like? What would an architecture of maintenance be like? I think thatch is a very interesting kind of, again, historic example. Thatch comes in all shapes and sizes. It's pretty much as global as people and plants are. The reason we don't build with thatch is because it requires maintenance. A roof like this would need to be replaced every sort of 10 to 15 years. But ecologically, it's better to replace this roof every decade than to build it once out of concrete. So what could a architecture that actually embraces care be like? Well, I think there's an interesting example from Mali. This is the Great Mosque in Djenné. It's covered with these protruding bundles of rods. They're called toran. And they're kind of decorative, right? They make the sort of facade have a bit of animation, looks a bit more fortified than it would do otherwise. But they serve another purpose because they are in fact permanent scaffolding that enables the mud facade of this earth brick building to be repaired every year after heavy rains damage it. Another example from Cameroon is these Tolek houses, Muslim Tolek houses. So they have this incredibly beautiful geometric patterning on the surface. It's a cantinery dome in form. They taper from, I think, that's about 30 centimeters to just 5 centimeters in thickness. They're a remarkable feat of engineering. But this pattern on the outside is not just decorative. It is also a kind of 3-dimensional ladder that allows the residents of the houses to clamber over the building and repair the mud facade when it needs maintenance. And I think both the Torren and the Tulloch houses are doing something very interesting, because they're invoking a duality, an architectural expression that is both decorative and functional, right? And if you think of Louis Sullivan's famous phrase that form should follow function, to express his proto-modernist philosophy that the aesthetic qualities of buildings should derive from meeting pragmatic challenges. It's interesting that this has been alive and well in Cameroon for centuries before Sullivan. And this duality is a theme we can find elsewhere in design history. In Japan, for example, the borrow technique is a way of mending garments again and again, handed down through generations until they develop a kind of patchwork quality, and it's hard to tell where the original garment ever was. Or kintsugi, the art of expressing the repair of a broken ceramic by dusting it with precious metals, dusting the repair with precious metals. And it's not so hard, you know, these are all kind of very traditional, almost folk examples, but I think there's something similar going on in the high-tech masters. This is Norman Foster's HSBC building in Hong Kong, and this is a cleaning crane on the roof of it. So this is a piece of infrastructure to enable these large windows to be washed every now and then, but it's also architectural form. It's also saying something about the thrust of Foster's high tech, that it should be machine-like and militaristic. And there's something similar happening on the Lloyd's building. Richard Rogers picks out this sort of electric blue for the cleaning infrastructure. So if cleaning can be a source of architectural expression, why can't maintenance as well? I'm going to flip through a couple. And I think there's something that we could even learn here from heavy metal. Right? This is as those of you who are fans of heavy metal know, this is a battle jacket. So that sort of denim waistcoat that you patch all of the patches of the bands you like and the gigs you've gone to, festivals you've been to, onto this waistcoat. And over time, it starts to tell a very rich story about its wearers' travels and tastes. And you really care for this thing, right? You constantly, it gets a lot of wear, gets a lot beaten up in mosh pits and so on. And so you constantly care for it. You mend it and you repair it. And that's partly why patches have become a feature of the kind of heavy metal aesthetic. But importantly, it's not pristine. Like the very kind of aesthetic culture of heavy metal allows a little bit of shabbiness to be permissive. We're not talking about Peter Barber's pristine white walls in Donnybrook Quarter anymore, where even a bit of chipped paint is seen as a failure. In fact, with the battle jacket tradition, the opposite is true, that wear and tear is sort of part of the fun of the thing. And it would be a bit weird if this was brand new or hadn't gone through the wars. I think Hundertwasser was on something similar. This is Hundertwasser House in Vienna, a housing scheme refurbishing an older building. And Hundertwasser had this idea that residents should be able to repair their own facades, even if they lived in a block of flats. And I think what he's doing here with the paint scheme is sort of suggesting that if a resident were to make a repair, even a very slightly botched and obvious repair, it would still feel comfortable and at home in a cohesive whole. So giving aesthetic permission for repairs to take place. And so finally, to finish, I kind of wonder if all of this wraps up to question the role of the architect. Perhaps the architect of the future is less of a visionary, sculpting form from pure imagination that will be fixed in space forever, and more maybe of a spatial therapist, someone who constantly reconfigures elements and matter to improve the lives and conditions of their clients. I think it's recognized that our addiction to minimizing maintenance is really a toxic desire to not care. So if we're going to unlearn things, let's unlearn that desire and instead embrace slow, steady, incremental, constant acts of care, soft, low carbon materials regularly maintained. And that is why for me, the new role model for architecture is not Howard Rourke, but is in fact groundskeeper Willie. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Finn. That's an absolute killer final slide. So yeah, that was a great talk. Thank you very much. We've got some questions in, so I'm going to, rather than taking the chair's prerogative and asking a question, I'm just going to invite the people who have asked to do that. So we have one from Dave Loader. Dave, do you want to just unmute and ask?
Sure. There. Thanks, Neil. Thanks a lot for that great talk, Finn. It was very provocative and a very timely and active response to the theme of Architecture Fringe. My question relates to who it is might actually be doing this care and this maintenance. Suppose if we think about say civic infrastructure and who might maintain that, and when it's maintained by the state or other forms of institution, those who maintain it are those who actually codify it and in some ways conceal that infrastructure from the public. Whereas because I was quite struck by those modern earth buildings that you were showing there, where it seems to be it's the public who is doing the care and maintenance. So there's maybe a question there about who should be doing that maintenance and what the rule for a different types of a public or different types of community might it be?
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, great question. I mean, this is obviously it's very efficient if you have a nation state to employ caretakers, park keepers, street sweepers, maintenance people who go around tinkering and fixing things. That would be a very efficient way to do it. But actually, as you know, we've seen a kind of total hollowing out of public sector investment in care, and it's much easier for local authorities to get capital investment to build new stuff than it is to get ongoing investment to care for existing stuff. And this, I think, means that over time you just have the kind of gradual abandonment of facilities and the gradual decline of buildings and public spaces. And then eventually someone comes along and says, oh, this is beyond repair. We need to knock it down and start again. But that could have been avoided if only someone had had the foresight to and the responsibility and acted on the responsibility to care for the stuff in the first place. But I do think there's a slide that I skipped over that I'm going to come back to. There's a series of transparent tools that were designed by a product designer. Sorry, I'll make that full screen. And the idea here was that, as you mentioned concealed infrastructure. That's sort of true of product design as well. A lot of products are designed to be hard to repair, or even impossible to repair sometimes, and it's sort of confusing, and they're in like vacuum formed plastic cases and so on. So the transparent tools series was an attempt to make household objects like a toaster or a kettle or a vacuum cleaner look and feel easy to repair. And the thought there was that if your household objects seemed a little more straightforward to repair, maybe people would be more likely to have a go at repairing them rather than throwing them away and buying one from scratch. And I think there's maybe a kind of architectural implication for this, which is like, don't conceal the infrastructure, make it a bit more visible, make it a bit more obvious, so that then if something goes wrong, maybe you even as a sort of a citizen could have a go at repairing it without needing, permission from your landlord or permission from your leaseholder or whatever, to have a go at sorting this out yourself. So I do believe that there's a really important role for the public sector to kind of reclaim its role as the steward of the land and to care for things better. But I also think there's sort of things that we could do as citizens to make repair more intuitive and more permitted.
Great, thanks, Vin. There's been a couple of other questions in. I'm aware that we're kind of running on for time, so what I'm going to do is try and roll them into one question with us in advance seeking apologies from the askers in case I mangle anything in the process. But they both, I guess, connect to the economics of this. So they're questions about how do we make the economic case for care and maintenance, say with, for example, developers or clients who are obsessed with like maximizing profit and quick, and doing so quickly, and the ideas of VAT on repair, zero on new build, all of these kind of cultural artifacts that we're kind of living with, cultural sort of economic processes that we're living with and have become very normalized. How do we break through that to kind of show other ways that we could kind of do these things? So it's the sort of the realpolitik or the real economic situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I understand. Well, I mean, yeah, VAT on refurbishing buildings is insane. We just need to campaign to get that abolished. Like people have been saying this for decades. It's a weird loophole that someone just needs to close because it's such a sort of silly incentive to pollute, essentially. So it's a 20% cheaper to not recycle than to recycle. So there are now campaigns. People are calling upon the government to scrap that VAT giveaway on refurbishment, on new build. On the sort of the wider question of how do you pay for repair, a lot of the time it's really good value for money to care for things properly, as long as you have a big enough time window to model it. So maybe the model of making your return in 20 years doesn't work so well, but over 200 years it works really well. So I think that's a kind of question for how we finance construction and the built environment. And we are actually starting to see this a little bit. There are kind of pension funds who are still a bit scarred from 2008 and aren't looking for 20-year investments. They're looking for super stable 200-year investments. This is partly because economic growth is so low in developed economies that buying government bonds is no longer a good thing to do if you're a pension fund. And so instead, pension funds are thinking, okay, well, what if we built a housing estate and we just took a sort of 2 or 3% return for 400 years from that housing estate? Would that be a good investment? And I think it would. But so that, yeah, that's about how we fight. That is sort of about monetary policy, and it's about how we finance the construction industry. But the sort of the biggest point on economics really is that the more economic activity you have, the worse it is for the climate. And this whole idea that you can have a growing economy but shrinking carbon emissions is a myth. And at some point, either because we will be forced to, or because we design a way to, we will have to figure out a way to create a stable state economy that is not growing in GDP year on year. And that is, I think, quite exciting, but it's only exciting if you approach it as a designer rather than as a kind of catastrophist, where you just realize that GDP is going to stop growing at some point. So we need to sort of see that change coming and come up with a plan for it. And that's really what degrowth is about. And that's what the Oslo Architecture Triennale was about, was saying, okay, what would a good economy look like that's not trying to grow GDP year on year? And once you start thinking about that, then you stop prioritizing productivity in the same way that kind of classical economists do. And suddenly spending a lot of human energy on repairing buildings becomes a really, really sound ecological thing to do. It's a bit like, AOC's Green New Deal thing, that there'll be a kind of retooling, and a lot of industrial workers will be kind of redeployed as stewards of the biosphere. And I think there's a sort of parallel narrative to that, which is that a lot of workers will be redeployed as stewards of the urban realm through mass repair schemes.
Great, thanks, Finn. And I think, yeah, I probably would urge people to maybe check out the work from the Oslo Triennale as well, which I think there's stuff online publication as well. So if anyone's interested in finding out more about that, there's stuff online. But I just want to say a big thank you, Finn, for that talk. It was a really interesting set of provocations and some beautiful imagery as well to illustrate it as well. So thanks so much for doing that for us. Big thank you from Architecture Fringe. So I'm going to pass back over to Andy and Raina now, who are going to invite everyone to kind of go again through the magical breakout room situation, and we'll see where we end up in cyberspace somewhere. And so Andy, I don't know, Raina, if you want to pick up from there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Finn. I think, Finn, you'll be leaving us now, so everybody will say goodbye to you.
Thanks, everybody. See you later. Good luck with the festival. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to break out into smaller rooms again, which is the main essence of why we're all here. So we'll be in smaller groups, but you'll be facilitated by someone from the Architecture Fringe team. We're here to help you, but so is everybody else. So if you have a project you'd like to sort of share, or if you're just looking for inspiration, that smaller chat group is there for that. Be generous with any thoughts that you might have. Perhaps you know someone to speak to a particular council or a funding stream or a venue for someone's project or an inspiration from somewhere else in the world. But we will be doing that, and we will all come back together at 8:15. So Raina, take us away to space.
I think this is all of us. Welcome back, everyone.
Oh, sorry, I just said a whole spiel and no one heard me. The locking numbers for Saturday, and I'm afraid you've not heard me, so I'll just use them myself. We had a great chat. I'm sorry, the time just disappears. I don't know where it goes. But we are just kind of a little summary now from each group, just to hear what everyone's been chatting about. Matt, do you want to go first and let us know just a quick summary?
Yeah. So in my group was Evie, Miranda, Nick, and Laura. Evie mentioned about a life building workshop. I think a project about a life building workshop. Basically, she would like to find out where she could find some materials to basically reuse or repurpose in order to conduct this workshop. We had a discussion about it and where she could potentially find some, but I believe that until then, a lot of opportunities about that might occur. Laura also had an interesting idea about materials, but from the ones that we basically dispose, and how every person on earth, and how in the way they dispose their materials and their trash can define something about us and of basically what we are and what we do. And I think that's a comment I made to Evie, that in architecture school, students tend to throw away a lot of materials without having a lot of thoughts on where those go, or the energy to create them and then just very easily dispose them. So I think these two notions were quite connected. And finally, Miranda and Nick had a very interesting idea of how we can support those that don't have the privilege of working from home, and how the public realm basically looking after those people, and how we can actually support them in order to be able to sustain what they're doing, especially under these circumstances. That's from my group.
Thanks for that, Matt. Neil, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I'll just very quickly sort of recap what we talked about. It had some really interesting projects and really nice conversations. So thanks everyone who was contributing ideas. If I get any of this wrong, sorry. We had Danica, who was talking about mapping and was talking about reclamation. So kind of demolition, waste, and this kind of circular nature of how we could kind of repurpose that and trying to map that process out. So she was talking to us from the Netherlands tonight, which is really nice to get some projects coming in from other places in the world as well. So linking that back to Glasgow as well, and looking at kind of maybe a live build project that could kind of come out of that. So it sounds maybe similar to some of the things that Matt's group was talking about. We had an idea for a project around the architectural history of Glasgow through the lens of Taggart, which I think is like, it's already a winner in my eyes, so whatever happens with it. So I think that's kind of a sort of really interesting kind of idea of like stitching together a city through an iconic sort of TV program. And also we're talking about outdoor cinema as well. So Jen from Aspect Cinema was in the group, and we were just having a quick chat at the end, and then we got brutally cut off by the timer halfway through a sentence, so we didn't quite manage to get to the end of that conversation. So sorry, Jen, about that. But yeah, a really great like range of projects, and just really interesting kind of to hear what people were up to.
I can see the chat. Rena, would you like to go next?
My breakout room was Liana and me.
Hey.
So I think Shauna could go next.
Yeah, sure. Hi. Okay, so we had Luke, who was joining us from London, who's a photographer and is going to be putting on an exhibition for the London Festival of Architecture. So he was wondering how we can bring this to Scotland as well and team up with the Architecture Fringe there. So looking for some help on like venues and funding and things too. We had Oliver and Sarah who were joining us from the US, and similarly looking at how we can get remote funding or funding from another place. They've got a really interesting project looking at Arthur Seat in Edinburgh, making it into a greenscape, thinking about gallery spaces and performance and things there. So I think between Luke and Sarah and Oliver, it's just understanding how they can get some help from those of us who are based in Scotland and understand venues and things here. So we were looking at the Padlet, or thinking about the Padlet for that. We had Shireen from the Glasgow Artists Moving Image Studios. So they're currently in the process of taking the Govan Hill cinema and renovating that. So I think they're hoping to have an outdoor cinema space next year. And it would be really good to team up with the Architecture Fringe for that. We had Anna McEwen, a recent graduate from Mazala, looking just at the moment to collaborate with people, I think, and just sort of help out, do some volunteering. So I guess, again, the Padlet, I think, will be a good place to sort of see who needs help, or there might be projects there which you can help with. And then we had Malcolm Fraser as well, who was just able to introduce an idea for a project that he's developing on unlearning urban orthodoxies and how we might unlearn current methods and look to more traditional methods and things that have been done in the past, but then he had to dash off. So yeah, I think if everyone can sort of help out on the Padlet, and hopefully these guys will get some good places that they can showcase their work.
Okay, thank you. In my group, I had Andy, Lucy, Dave, Karina, and Adam. Adam is based up by Inverness and is very keen to make contact with anybody who's based up in the Highlands. He's already made some contacts from the past Architecture Fringe, which we introduced him to, but if you are based up there, please say hello to Adam. Andy has a venue here and in Montenegro and is kind of just mulling over some ideas. Dave is an interior design lecturer at the GSA and is looking to try and work out how to better present all the research from the students for next year. And we had an extensive chat about online, offline, and how we might do that. And Karina and Lucy are some crossover, interested maybe in the circular economy. And Karina, I know, has 2 colleagues in the other rooms, and we shared a link which Marion had found, which I put in the chat, called Globe Chain, which is like a free kind of material recycling circular structure there. Lucy, who has put work on the Fringe before, has a wee venue in, I think it's Henderson Street, Henderson Road. Lucy, is it still in Edinburgh?
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, it's Henderson Road. It's like bottom of Dundas Street.
That's right. And so, and Anne has a venue too. And yeah, Lucy's, if you want to just feel free to post in the main chat as well, but looking for collaborators for, again, sort of deconstruct and map everyday objects and their impact in terms of the environment and politically. So it was really great. So as we kind of trying to assist where we can, the Padlets, which I posted again in the chat for everybody, please feel free just to log your idea in there. Obviously things will evolve and move through, but just trying to be visible as we can to everybody. On the open program as a chat, so if you're really wanting to try and collaborate, please just post there. As we said earlier, the Fringe is the best excuse ever to talk to anybody. We've got some private chat here if you wanted anyone's contact details. Feel free to contact us again afterwards, or you can just look someone up yourself, but go and speak to people. Just on funding, which seemed to emerge from a few chats, obviously we ourselves have to apply for funding. We don't have any structural funds yet. We are growing that through the Patreon and continued conversations with Creative Scotland. But as the open programme has always run since we started, like the inspiration we took from the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, everybody keeps agency of their own projects, but that does also include trying to work out how you might fund that. Some advice might be maybe to try and work out what your elemental basic costs might be in comparison to, say, your aspirational costs, about where you really want the project to be. Trying to get some hold of some figures yourselves about how much that might cost. And I guess after that, if you're based in Scotland, you can try and apply to Creative Scotland. If it's under 15,000, the response takes 8 weeks. If it's over 15,000, it's 12 weeks. Architectural practices are sometimes interested in trying to sponsor very specific work. Sometimes the more specific it is, it might align with their values. To try and approach that. It's not easy, obviously, to raise funds. We also have to go through that ourselves. If anybody has any funding ideas or streams, feel free to put them into the chat. And if you are looking for venues, look down in London there, for example. Again, the Padlet is a good place to go, but I'm sure you might be aware of the photography community up in Scotland, Luke, perhaps the street level in Glasgow and Stills in Edinburgh, even making maybe contact with them to try and map out where photography might normally be shown, but obviously the Fringe shows photography historically in many venues. Yeah, that's all I can say off the top of my head. If anybody has any thoughts or advice to anybody, feel free to put your hand up or just speak. Okay. Well, I hope that's useful for everybody. I know it's not easy being online. Just to give you again some dates, the open call for the Architecture Fringe 2021 will open in mid-January. The open call will close in very early April, and obviously, as per the socials and the website, the Architecture Fringe will run from the 4th to the 20th of June. The opening party, I hope we have an opening party, will be on Friday the 4th of June as normal. If you have taken part in the Architecture Fringe before, there's no change whatsoever for open programme contributors. It remains free to place work onto the open programme platform. The Architecture Fringe team here does not gatekeep or curate your content. It's completely open and up to you what you do. But when the open call closes in early April, everything that is submitted to that must be real, because we begin to reorientate all that information towards the general public. Obviously, your projects aren't completely finished because you have another 2 months after that, but anything you submit to the open call must be real and have a commitment to happening, and you still have some 2 months to go. But obviously, we then put that into the online and printed programs, and the public begin to go through all that, so we can't advertise work that isn't going to happen. But why we have these meetups here is to try and help everybody along. Yes, the open call information, which will be available in mid-January, will take you through every single thing that you need to submit online, and that includes dates, times, any venues, any ticket links, blurbs, high quality imagery. You understand what generally all that will be. Right, I'm talking. Does anybody have any questions or reflections, or have I missed anything from the team?
I don't think so. Thanks, Andy, for rounding that up really well. So there's loads of sort of more stuff that will come out over the next few months. This is our last meetup for this year. Well, I wasn't going to say it, but Merry Christmas. And I think, we look forward to sort of catching up with everyone in the new year. But as I say, there's resources. We've tried to put as much as we can online in terms of the Padlet. So there's a space where you can sort of access stuff, but also upload as well. So if you have things you want to share, then just dive in there. Yeah, thanks again, Andy, for sort of sharing all that, and thanks in absentia to Finn as well for his talk at the start, which was sort of really thought-provoking on a number of different levels. And yeah, I think that's us for this evening. So thanks again for your time and for getting involved. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.